Next performer on stage is me, Ski! Big round of applause for Ski! For a lot of years, one of the things I did as a hobby, I'm one of those guys that likes arguing online. I especially like arguing online, not because of the anonymity it affords me, because I'm almost always doing it with my real name, but because it gives me a chance to actually look stuff up. When I'm just talking in person, I can be wrong a lot. I have a deeply flawed memory at best. So it's nice for me to be able to look things up. I live, because of my shit-tastic memory, in kind of a constant state of doubt about myself and about the things I know. And so I've gone back and researched things and researched things and researched things and researched things, the same fucking things over and over again, just because of that. But one of the things that's done for me is it's given me a sense of skepticism, and I mean genuine skepticism, not I think vaccines cause autism skepticism, but genuine, I wonder if what I'm reading is true, and I wonder how it is I know that something is true. And it turns out that this is a pretty critical question that has gone from something that I was deeply concerned about 20 years ago to something that everybody is deeply concerned about now. Back then, I had a pet theme, a pet subject that I loved arguing, and that was evolution versus creationism. I had some friends who were young Earth creationists, who were old Earth creationists, and I had studied genetics when I was in school. So I had a background to begin approaching this. And we'd start talking and we'd start arguing, and I don't like to argue for gotcha points. I don't like to try to be like, aha! I like to actually be, hey, it's easy to make mistakes. It's easy to walk down the wrong path. With my memory, I'm surprised I don't do it more often. This is something that happens. It's okay to make a mistake. The trick is figuring out what to believe. And this brings us to today's kind of story here. How do you know what to believe? I spent this weekend doing some shooting with a buddy of mine, and while we were out there, he was razzing me about RFK Jr. He's like, you know, RFK Jr. is doing some great things. And I'm like, well, there are a handful of things that RFK has proposed that don't start from a place of pure insanity. But almost everything he does ends in a place of pure insanity. And he's like, well, name one thing. I'm like, well, he's dismantling the committees that suggest vaccines. And he's like, well, that's not bad. He hasn't banned any vaccines. And I'm like, you don't have to ban them to make them hurt people. Once you get below herd immunity of 95% roughly, the chances of somebody who's immunocompromised or has problems, or the vaccine just didn't take, because sometimes they don't, suddenly somebody who thought they were protected or hoped they were protected by herd immunity is going to get sick, and potentially very, very sick. And it's not their fault. And he's like, well, they said that you could get herd immunity from the vaccines, the COVID vaccines, and that never happened. You could still get sick. You could still, I'm like, hey, we learned a lot of stuff during the COVID. And he's like, well, now RFK's taking all these studies that were suppressed. And I'm like, what studies that were suppressed? He's like, all the studies. There are tons of studies that were suppressed. They were all censored. I'm like, studies don't get censored. They get critiqued. They get critiqued like a new kid on the playground at school. They get brutalized. If you were a scientist and you put forth a published paper and you did something wrong, you're going to hear about it. If anybody cares. And there's almost always somebody who cares about your particular subject. But it's interesting. He said, well, you shouldn't be censoring people's papers, people's research. You shouldn't be censoring things like that. And I'm like, well, let me tell you a story. When I was in the Army, my favorite saying from my conservative friends was, your freedom ends when your fist hits my face. Which is, as soon as it becomes dangerous, As soon as you start hurting other people, you lose that freedom. So let me tell you about a guy named John Brinkley. It was in the United States. It was just after the Civil War. John Brinkley had been practicing medicine successfully on the East Coast in North Carolina, but decided he would go and start doing some great stuff in the great state of Kansas. And while he was out there, he had the most genius idea you have ever heard of. He was going to sew goat testicles into people. I shit you not. And that's what the motherfucker did. For the rest of his adult life, raking in the equivalent of millions of dollars. He would go around, he would razzmatazz, he had great advertising, and he would say, "Are you balding? We can cure that. Are you impotent? We can cure that. Do you have dyspepsia? We can cure that. You know how? We'll sew a goat testicle into you." And it didn't hurt most of the time. Your body will take a look at it and go, "That is not right. That does not belong in here." And if you were relatively healthy, it would reabsorb back into your body. But, there were a few hundred edge cases that led to death from sepsis, as you'd expect. But he had such presence, he had such advertising, that he just raped people, just money came in, just kept flowing in. And eventually, the other medical professionals were like, "Somebody has got to stop this asshole." And they ran him with the U.S. They convinced the government that he was murdering people, because he was. And they ran him out of the United States. So he went across the border to Mexico. And Mexico at the time was pissed at the U.S. because we'd taken the radio spectrum and we just divided it up how we felt was necessary and hadn't given any to the Mexicans. So they were pretty pissy about it. So they authorized him the largest radio station that the world at the time had ever seen. And he began broadcasting, and he fucking invented radio, music radio. If you listen to KDWB, you have to thank the guy who was sewing goat testicles in the motherfucker. And he would play bluegrass, he would play country, up-and-coming country artists, and then in between he'd have advertisements. "Are you suffering from baldness or dyspepsia? Come down here and we'll sew." And later on, he ran for governor of Kentucky, and the Mexican government upped his authorization to a 1 million watt radio tower. He could be heard in Canada on a clear day, and from Mexico, he ran for governor of Kansas. He failed, but it was a really good try. Locals said they didn't need a radio to hear it because it would ring, they could hear it from the barbed wire as they went by. That's how powerful it was. But the point of this story is not just to say goat testicles, although that is definitely like a plus.
Work for me.
But the point of this story is he died penniless from a mansion in Mexico, millions of dollars, wife with fur coats and diamonds and all of these things. He died penniless because all of the people he murdered sued his ass into the dirt. And this is the problem with where we are right now. I feel that parts of society have determined, thanks to the cigarette companies, and then later taking those same disinformation peddlers and turning them on to climate change, and from there to any subject they wanted. You don't need to prove somebody wrong, you just need to cast enough doubt. But eventually, you end up dying penniless in Mexico because of all the people you fucking murdered. And this is the problem. We don't have the time to wait for everybody to die before we have to say, "Oh, you were just lying." Thank you. Woo! On deck we have Flavius Maximus. But coming up on stage next, but wait! First, a stupid joke. There are roughly 2 reasons why I'm single. One, I just can't let go of things. And 2, I'm really into asphyxiation. And now, put your hands together for Rick Logan, everybody!
And on that note,
You just died in my arms tonight.
I think you're single because you're putting the word goat testicles into the conversation.